It was supposed to be just another weekday evening, the kind that blends into all the others. She stopped by the grocery store after work, tired, scrolling through a mental list of things she still had to do before the day could officially end. He was there for the same reason: milk, bread, something quick for dinner, nothing more. Neither of them was in the mood for conversation, eye contact, or anything unexpected. They passed each other between aisles without noticing, both moving on autopilot, both ready to be home. They met properly near the checkout, when a small inconvenience slowed everything down. The line stopped moving, someone ahead had an issue with payment, and impatience spread quietly through the store. She sighed, not dramatically, just enough to release the tension of the day. He heard it and smiled without thinking, making a comment about how the store always seemed to test people's patience at the worst times. She laughed, surprised at herself, and answered back. The conversation lasted only a minute at first, light, harmless, nothing that felt important. But when the line finally moved, neither of them was ready to let it end. Outside, bags in hand, the cold evening air felt sharper. They stood there awkwardly, unsure whether to say goodbye or continue talking. Somehow, they did continue. About work. About how tired everyone seemed lately. About how strange it was that small moments like this could suddenly feel lighter than an entire day. There was no instant attraction, no dramatic spark. Just comfort. The kind that feels familiar even when it shouldn't. They walked in the same direction for a few blocks, discovering they lived close enough that this wasn't entirely random. When they finally stopped at the corner where their paths separated, neither of them rushed the goodbye. He asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime, not confidently, not nervously, honestly. She said yes without hesitation, realizing how rare that felt lately. Later that night, unpacking groceries in her quiet kitchen, she thought about how easily the evening had shifted. Nothing big had happened. No grand gesture, no perfect timing. Just two people who were open enough to let an ordinary moment become something more. And somewhere across the neighborhood, he was thinking the same thing, that sometimes life doesn't announce change loudly. Sometimes it waits in the checkout line, disguised as routine, until you decide to pay attention. The coffee they planned turned into a slow ritual rather than a single meeting. They chose a small place neither of them had strong opinions about, which somehow made it easier to be honest. Sitting across from each other in daylight felt different from the grocery store's artificial lights, but the comfort was still there, steady and unforced. Conversation moved naturally from safe topics to personal ones, not because either pushed, but because listening felt easy. She talked about how routine had quietly taken over her life, how days blended together until she forgot when she last felt excited about something unexpected. He admitted that he had grown used to keeping things simple to avoid disappointment, even when simplicity started to feel like emptiness. They didn't try to impress each other with ambition or confidence. They shared doubts, and that made the space between them feel real. They began meeting without turning it into a plan. Short walks after work, shared dinners that started as something quick and ended with long conversations, small errands done together just because it felt better not to be alone. There were moments of hesitation, times when one of them pulled back slightly, afraid to move too fast or assume too much. Instead of misunderstanding, they talked about it. That became their quiet strength. No dramatic declarations, no promises made too early, just clarity. They learned how to sit with uncertainty without letting it turn into fear. Weeks passed, and what started in a checkout line became part of their everyday life. They noticed how their moods affected each other, how one bad day softened when shared, how laughter came easier in company. There were disagreements too, small ones, about timing, habits, expectations, but they didn't feel threatening. They felt like learning. Like adjustment. Like two people choosing to grow toward each other instead of protecting their separate corners. One evening, walking past the same grocery store where they first spoke, she laughed and pointed it out. He shook his head, surprised by how close he had come to missing it all. They didn't call it fate. They called it attention. being present enough to notice when an ordinary moment offers more. Life didn't suddenly become perfect or predictable, but it felt fuller, more awake. And as they continued forward, step by step, they understood something important. Not every story begins with fireworks or certainty. Some begin quietly, in the middle of routine, when two people decide to stop rushing and let something real happen where they least expected it.